Alright everyone, we start off today talking of course about the Ukraine dust-up that's now apparently imminent. The Biden administration effectively going back though on its own initial statement. The White House saying the other day, well, at this point, Russia's clearly going to invade Ukraine. Then coming out and Biden saying, well, we're not really sure what they're going to do. So, I don't know, strategic confusion, I suppose. That's a pretty good description of the entire administration's first year in office. The asterisk administration has been doing 180s on virtually every policy. You've got constant incremental disbursements of money trying to distract people, like Biden's 400 million N95 masks, which will last about a week if they're used properly, so he's just trying to take credit for the inevitable lull in Omicron cases. You have 100 million that just got disbursed from the infrastructure deal to help lower the cost of powering homes and heating them, and again, that's about a week's worth for a handful of people. If you know anything about energy costs, especially in the Biden economy, the 100 million is not going to be even a drop in the bucket. I suppose it's carefully timed so that some of the marginal states, in February the weather starts getting a little bit better than it was in the middle of winter. I suppose the idea is that as the shortages hopefully wane, depending on Biden's particular foibles in the future, the idea is to take credit for that too. So you've got a disingenuous administration that doesn't know what it's doing. You now have NATO forces amassing in Eastern Europe, which Putin's laughing at because, they're not going to do anything to him. The Ukrainians came out and gave a message of optimism the other day and said, well, there aren't enough Russian forces there for a full-scale invasion, so we're thinking it'll be more limited. Oh, how wonderful. But then Biden comes out, countermands himself again, and says that if there's any invasion at all, there will be sanctions. Well, you said that Russia wouldn't face significant consequences if it was just a little bit of an incursion. Probably why they did a 180 on this, again, as of the other day, because that angered the Ukrainians, and Hunter Biden, of course, got a lot of money working in Ukraine, so they've sort of got Biden over a barrel. The worst case scenario is happening. An asterisk president who's out to lunch, whose foreign policy is engineered by a bunch of war hawks, that are even worse than he is probably, is reigning over a situation where Russia clearly senses weakness. It's like a shark circling around after the water's been chummed, or there's a dying, flailing whale in the water. Again, an apt sort of metaphor for the Biden administration in general, and there's nothing really to be done. At this point, the only thing to be done about Ukraine is say, we'll restore the sanctions that you yourself unilaterally removed, that is Biden, Nord Stream, etc. You don't have German cooperation, so that'll be toothless. The UK is building its own military sphere because they clearly don't have any confidence in Biden's absent leadership, and so the whole Western project effectively is beginning to devolve. To be clear, Russia is very, very happy about this, the fact that the Beijing-Biden administration is so weak. This was predictable. We always knew that it would be a disastrous presidency, at least people who were, unmedicated and not completely propagandized up to the eyeballs on Trump derangement syndrome. This would not be happening, to be clear, if Donald Trump were in the presidency. Russia wouldn't be planning to invade, ergo there would be no warmongering from the West in the region. There would be no need for it. Now, before I flesh this out further, keep in mind down below, there will be a pinned comment if you're watching this video on YouTube. I make exclusive content every single day on the links therein, different video hosting sites that I use, material that does not go onto YouTube. Also, if I seem a little bit distracted or angry today, Amazon KDP is doing fucky stuff and bouncing my works. They've clearly changed their public domain methodology, and so I'm basically being harassed at the moment by an algorithm. This has happened before. I'll work through it, but it means that probably at my expense, I'll have to have a bunch of works re-illustrated so that the copyright system won't bounce them. So it'll be interesting the months to come as I was hoping to wrap up the mainline edited works. Of course, Amazon choosing the perfect timing to screw me on this. This is basically a failure of Biden and Obama. You'll remember, of course, who was the vice president at the time? The Crimea was invaded. The Ukraine first had destabilization issues and a Russia issue. Well, Biden was. Much like Biden was the VP when NIH and Fauci were helping to fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab, leading to the current crisis you have with COVID. Orange man bad, though. Somehow he's responsible for that. They haven't tried to pin the Ukraine thing on Trump because there's no way to do it because our military readiness was actually high. There was actually diplomacy going on with Russia. We were told for 4 years, by the way, that was a bad thing. He shouldn't have been meeting with the Russians. He should have done what Obama did and what Biden's doing now, which is throw his hands up, say there's no diplomatic solution, we can't talk to these people, they're crazy, and then build up to warmonger in the region. I'm slightly worried that there might actually be some sort of war that gets the United States dragged in the context of Ukraine. Again, because a bunch of war hawks that just want to make money are the ones determining foreign policy. Joe Biden is not determining these policies. He should take the blame for them because he's the chief executive. But is he actually the leader? No. Milley and people like that are the leaders, which should make you even more nervous because quite clearly our military has become a joke. This should not be happening. The military's point is not to be woke and make people feel good. The military is used for killing people. Since we're clearly not going to get into a direct confrontation with Russia, even if a conflict begins, the odds of that rise through accident, but it wouldn't be on purpose. If there's going to be a conflict, you want to kill people. We'd be fighting, I don't know, Eastern Ukrainian ethno-nats that have Russian origin or something. This could end up being another Iraq or another Yugoslavia situation. Remember that Trump never started a new war. Biden appears to be itching to, partially to save his polling numbers. He's collapsed in the polls. His border policies are widely disliked, including by a large number of Dems. His economic policies even more disapproved of. And now you have COVID, by the way, which initially was bolstering him in the polls. He had 50-50 approval roughly for a very long time. He's now almost double digits below water on that. So when everything is going wrong, the only thing you can do is start a war. Now, do I think that Biden or even the generals behind him would want a World War III scenario by pestering the Russians? No. But I do think that they're trying to use this as an excuse. Another problem is they painted themselves into a corner with Russia bad. You had years of propaganda claiming that the Russians were interested in staging a coup and overthrowing the U.S. government, and Trump was their pawn and stuff like this, which, again, Biden appears to have done them multiple solids. Trump didn't. And so in order to keep that propagandistic lie going, you have to double down at this point, because now Russia's actually warmongering after a neighbor. The problem is the U.S. is not in a position, as far as readiness goes, as far as the so-called leadership that we have in the military sense goes, to counter them, and it never should have been necessary from the get-go. The time to act was after Crimea was annexed, or preferably before that. But the Obama administration sat on its ass, did nothing. Obama willfully resisted calls to do anything about the situation. The problem is that sort of weakness, that inability or unwillingness to make sure that something bad doesn't happen in the future, effectively just emboldens other countries to do whatever they want to do. We're moving towards a world, because of the Obama, Biden, Bush sort of trifecta that we've suffered under for most of the last couple of decades, absent Trump's term. Because of that weakness, China is getting big balls. They're openly calling for Taiwan now. Again, I think they'd lose if they attempt to invade. I think Japan and other local countries would actually get involved, and because they're not nuclear states, China would have to hold back unless it wants to be completely condemned or start a world war. I think China loses, but I don't think Russia loses. Russia's in a good position right now to overrun eastern Ukraine. And then we have that ambiguity from the Biden admin, where he says that they won't face repercussions for a limited invasion, but then says that they won't, but they will face sanctions. And meanwhile, Russia's doubling down, saying that they're going to react accordingly if the West, basically doesn't butt out of the situation. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we can't do anything other than double down, when what we should be doing is saying, look, it's not in our sphere. We screwed the pooch. It got punted as an issue multiple times. Now the Ukrainians have no choice but to fight on their own. If you want that to happen, if this weren't about arms dealing, If it were genuinely about a threat to Western civilization, what would you expect the Western countries to do? They wouldn't have acted how they had over the last decade. They would have made sure that there was greater readiness in the region, in Ukraine and around Ukraine. We wouldn't have to have a buildup because the forces would already be there. We would have attempted to arm the Ukrainians. You do have a lot of citizen partisans there that are armed now, but it's not enough to counter Russian assault. We're talking about people, a small proportion of the population because of gun restrictions in most European countries. It's a big problem. Maybe better armed than the Dutch or the French population, but not capable of dealing with column after column of Russian artillery and tanks. They've got all the toys that make the noise. The U.S. has plenty of assets in the region, but can't directly fight another nuclear power. That's mutually assured destruction effectively negates that concept. So Biden-Obama's failures have come home to roost. Wonderful. So Biden has screwed up everything else. Now he's got another major foreign policy blunder. You've got Afghanistan. He lays waste to that, ignores Trump's initial withdrawal schedule, which called for the scuttling or evacuation, by the way, of the weapons that were left behind for the Taliban. We've handed the Taliban enough weaponry to be a major world military power on the regional level, and now they're in China's sphere, effectively. Now we're fucking around in Ukraine. My question is, why is Biden not sending some of those U.S. troops to our own border? That's a more pressing issue for us in the domestic sense. By the way, it would probably help his polling. Oh, that's right, the leftoids would complain. Oh, no human is illegal. That's what it is. His administration is playing politics and not interested in actual leadership. It's the politics of politicization as opposed to attempting to actually do your job. We see this from the House Democrats. They're too busy rambling about January 6th and the non-existent coup attempt to actually do their job too. Dems in the Senate, with respect to everyone other than Manchin and Sinema, who are basically just egotists acting out of their own self-interest anyway, not out of an appreciation for the decorum of the Senate, doing it for their own purposes, they're the only ones that are even doing their job in any manner among the Senate Democrats. This is another reason why at all hazards we need to make sure to get more civically active. Wipe out the neocons in the GOP, retool it to become an actual populist movement, and punish the Democrats come the midterms. Because otherwise we're going to have to deal with more of this shit. You could have a situation here where a war is given the green light, where a majority of Democrats decide to side with the remaining neocon dross in the Republican Party and manages to scrape together enough votes because there was a false flag attack or something like that. Oh my God, a Russian rocket hit the embassy that we evacuated. By the way, you've had 2 U.S. Embassies evacuated under Biden, 0 under Trump for 4 years. First year of Biden, you've already got 2 of those. Well, a year and a week now, so we'll give him credit. He's in the second quarter now. That's another thing I would like to briefly address. Have you used any news aggregator lately? If you do, you've probably seen 3 or 4 very, very similar looking stories. Hush, hush, that's totally a coincidence. With regards to, Biden had a rocky first quarter, but it's just the first quarter. Don't get too concerned. Basically leading the question, effectively insinuating, we're on Biden's team, we're still Team Biden. Yeah, he fucked up for an entire year, but maybe the next year will be better. Judging from this happening in the first week of his second year as * administration's de facto steward head. He basically is like the steward of Gondor managing decline at this point, and he's definitely just as demented. Based on that, I'd say probably it'll be worse than the first year of Biden's administration. People need to get back on. Liberals, please admit that you were wrong. Now Biden's warmongering. What more does he need to do to convince you that he was just the pig-in-the-poke steward that's designed to rubber stamp all of the worst foreign policies and domestic economic policies possible while ingratiating himself to multi-billionaires? That's all he's done since he's been elected. So another major diplomatic failure. When diplomacy fails, that's when the fighting begins. This used to be generally understood. Liberals used to parrot that constantly. I remember because I was an Iraq War kid, a millennial, core millennial. I remember all the Bush era and Obama as well. He gets a pass because of the color of his skin from a lot of liberals who started delving into idpol, but he was doing the same fucking shit. This is failure. An abject, stark failure. So that the very edge of Europe is now hazarded by a bunch of Russians. Well, it was predictable. We already knew Putin had his eyes on these provinces in East Ukraine when he attacked Crimea in the first place. We knew it was likely to happen. You could have taken steps to prevent it from happening, but no steps were taken. Oh, it's not a priority. Yeah, we would rather go and bomb Syria. We would rather go and crow about the fact that the Egyptian government was overthrown by Islamo-fascists. And then it was a really big, terrible thing, according to Obama, when the military said, no, enough is enough, and decided to put back the secular government and initial constitution. Libya, when that fell, we were too busy fucking around in Libya in an incoherent manner, again, ruining that country entirely. Now it has no development index. It had been developing fairly rapidly because Gaddafi's bad. Gaddafi says bad things about us. We have to do something about that. Meanwhile, ignoring a more pressing issue, again, right on the gates of NATO, fucking around in North Africa and the Middle East instead. This is the Obama-Biden foreign policy at work, its weakness, and it is failure. That's about all. Peace out.